All right, welcome. I am going to be talking about Eclipse Open VSX, the Open VSX Registry, and how Ericsson perceives and navigates through this one. So I want you to understand at the end of this why Open VSX is here, and also from a historical context how things will work. So if you look at the timeline, and this is a very, very gross timeline, in the beginning we had project IDEs like Eclipse, and they would have their own plugin mechanisms. And then when other programs like VS Code came along, they took the plugin thing and went even further, saying, we're going to just supply a bare bones system. It's going to be completely useless without plugins, unless you want to edit a text or something. And so they have their LSP and they have plugins. And they put all their plugins in the VS Code marketplace. Now, after that, Theia comes along, and we can't use the VS Code marketplace. So we are using, so then the lovely folks at Typefox developed the Open VSX Registry. Now, Open VSX Registry is a server, but it doesn't have any plugins in it yet, and doesn't have a URL yet. So the Eclipse Foundation makes Eclipse Open VSX. And, well, Microsoft, they have CodeOSS and VSCodium, and they don't want that using their marketplace. So they pointed to Open VSX 2. And after that, we have the fact that this is becoming one of the most successful projects. A lot of people are using it, and a lot of people don't even realize that they're using Eclipse. And when things get successful, but they don't have the resources to become successful, then you get growing pains. So with all of this, I want to talk about how Ericsson sees everything. That is the intro. If you want to go to another talk now, you already know everything I'm going to say. So who am I? I'm not going to read this. I'm someone that loves open source. I work in it, and I have the privilege of being able to make the world a better place using it. And I am thrilled to have that opportunity. I'm also very lucky to be in such an esteemed group where all of you are probably in the same situation as me, and you're able to make the world a better place through open source. So to recap, I'm going to clear up some basic terms. Eclipse Open VSX is the software project. It is the code of the server. The Open VSX Registry is the instance of that code running on Eclipse hardware, and it's being hosted by the Eclipse Foundation. Now, within the code base, there's the Open VSX CLI, the web UI, and the server. And the reason I'm bringing this up is that some people got nervous when I was talking about the Open VSX Registry, that I was going to talk about the registry class within the Open VSX server. There is a registry class. I'm not talking about that. When I say registry, I'm talking about the server. Clear as mud? Excellent. Next up, there are two major players. There are other alternatives, but they are much more self-hosted. There's the VS Code Marketplace and OpenVSX. So here I took the liberty of making a quick decision chart of should you use OpenVSX or the Marketplace. If you're using VS Code, you can use the VS Code Marketplace or OpenVSX with a little tweaking. If you're using not VS Code, including CodeOSS and VSCodium, or Superior Theia, OpenVSX is the place to be. And once again, reminder, without plugins, these editors are not very useful, and we need a marketplace or a place to get the plugins. So now, from Ericsson's perspective, marketplaces are hard. Not for the code. The code is hard, and it was great work that was done. But when you make a marketplace, you're basically telling a bunch of people, hey, come over here and give us your stuff. Are we making a cathedral or a bazaar? Are we letting everyone do whatever they want? Am I letting everyone here make their own plugin called GitLens, and then have everyone use the same icon, and then have you guys fight over that. Or are we saying this is the one true Git lens, as an example? What is under control? If someone decides to put up some crypto mining plugins, is it allowed? How can we bring marketplaces into Ericsson? Now, even if said crypto miner is allowed and even maybe encouraged in the like the internet, maybe it's against company policy, and maybe you're in a situation in your company where you have the same problem, where Open VSX is more permissive than what you want internally. So how can we make these marketplaces in an Ericsson compliant way? Now that means that we need to know the security aspects of it. It doesn't mean that the patches have to be secure, but if they have vulnerabilities, we have to know about them. And we have to accept the risk if we are going to take them. We have to make sure that everything is license compliant. We are a large international company. We need to make sure that we have trade compliant software that we deliver. And that means, for example, to be careful with certain things such as encryption keys. We have privacy concerns. If you make an LSP protocol that basically just takes every cursor move and every letter you type and send it back home, if we're working on something that's creating value and a unique selling point, we might not approve that kind of workflow. And so we do want to make sure that the code that is being written stays on our computer. We're very privacy-centric. And of course, there is branding issues too, where we want to have a consistent look and feel across most of our products. So conversely, open marketplaces like on the internet, all of these points are basically saying there is very little control and people like it that way. People want to be able to do what they want, and well, that's kind of redundant, isn't it? But people like being able to be in control of their own projects, and we don't want to stop that. This is how excellent innovation happens. But we have to look at it and see which parts we want to take and use internally. So, a little reminder, Ericsson does depend on software. I'm like 83% sure that other companies are in the same boat. We need to give our developers the best tools so that they can make the best software out there. And I'm going to just say, from a feature point of view, VS Code is really good. But it's not compliant with the previous statements. What about the CodeOSS, Theia VSCodium stuff? The licensing of the VS Code marketplace prohibits their use, so we needed to have something else. And we need to have our own marketplace. And yeah, I've mentioned this maybe 8 times so far. Without the plugins, all of these great editor or IDE platforms can't really do much. Enter VSX. Now, you all probably know what Open VSX is, but it's that open source registry for VS Code extensions. I love how well scoped it is. I love that we have nearly 3,000. I didn't check. Maybe we passed 3,000 since I last checked. I'm getting a nodding confirmation. Over 3,000 plugins in there. It's used by Theia. It's used by VSCodium. It can be used by CodeOSS. It's hosted by Eclipse. I heard, and I cannot confirm, but I heard it a few times that it's taking a lot of their web traffic. So now, VS Code, again, was not found to be suitable. And I just wanted to put this slide in to remind everyone it is a great product. And now, before continuing, I'm not a lawyer. This is not legal advice. This is not financial advice. This is not medical advice. So let's get some reminders out there. Ericsson is a big company. We have over 100,000 employees, over 30,000 R&D employees. We have 100 years of experience or over. We have a culture of service level agreements. We basically say, this is going to do X. And then the other team is saying, oh, good, I wanted X. And then we give it. Wait, it didn't do X. Here, let's fix to match X. This is a domain, telecom is a domain with many legal requirements. I'm sure that you've seen that. And we have some stricter ways of working in certain domains because of that. So Eclipse Open VSX, again, it allows the IDEs to use these plugins. And it has some really, really cool, unique selling points. So it's non-monolithic in terms of the design. You can have 8 Open VSXs running. There's only one Eclipse Open VSX, or there's only one Open VSX registry, I'm sorry. But you can have as many registries as you want. It should soon have user access control, from what I've heard. It should allow us to upload internal plugins that have absolutely zero market value in open source, but that are super important internal to us. And I can't highlight this enough. It's open source, which means that if there's something wrong, we don't have to wait for a vendor to fix it. We can jump in ourselves. And it's vendor neutral. It's in the foundation. And as of this year, it has a proper working group. If you're interested, I believe that John Kellerman is the manager, so you can reach out to him about that. So why don't we just rely on the Open VSX registry? We have different needs. We have a privacy policy. We have the security policy. We have licensing policies and trade compliance policies and the service level agreements, which means also, we want to be able to control the servers so that we can try to have different uptimes. So what is left to be done within VSX? And we do have developers working on this. They are not aiming to contribute the parts that we're doing that make no sense in open source, but we do need to have OAuth support decoupled from GitHub, or authentication support decoupled from GitHub. There are several internal plugins that we have, and we don't want people to find them out because developers might be bleeding IDs, plugin IDs. So we definitely want to have a way of having that internal Open VSX. And we definitely want user access control. And this, I remember yesterday there was a talk about security saying that security and features don't go hand in hand. In this case, security and UX absolutely go hand in hand. If you're a developer working on Project X and you don't have access to the plugins that are useful for Project Y, you have a less cluttered environment. In this case, it would also potentially be faster. So security will add performance and better UX. I think that's really cool. So what do we do internally? We've already set up an internal Open VSX. And we are working with our internal auditing tools. More on that very soon. We have a pipeline in development to automate the compliance because basically we have 30,000 R&D engineers. Let's say that less of them come in. I still don't want the developers of this team to have to support them directly and every one of the requests. We want to automate these kind of things. So this tool chain, I want to preface, is an internal tool chain for validation with telecom sauce all over it. But it's very similar to the open source equivalents, and I am going to be talking about the open source equivalents for these. So this is the most important slide for me. Why does Ericsson want OpenVSX? OpenVSX represents security. This is what I was building up to. When you have, and security isn't about being hacked or pwned. If you have a non-compliant license, what happens? You get a nice call from lawyers, and the FSF, they're super nice people, but it's still going to cost our lawyers time, and that's a security risk for the cost of the product. We love that. Also, the OpenVSX license agreement says that if you don't have a license, you're MIT. If you don't like MIT, add your own license. The VS Code marketplace, as far as we can tell, has some unlicensed code, and that is ambiguity, and ambiguity is a security threat because, once again, lawyers get involved, and that increases the cost. it's part of a foundation, which means that if ever one company walks away, it still exists. It's got a it's designed with distributed in mind, which means that we can actually have a stake in the uptime of this kind of project. And that's very good for security. You don't want 10,000 developers to have an update blocked, because imagine 10,000 developers waiting 2 minutes for the DNS to resolve or something. That actually becomes very expensive fast. And the Eclipse Foundation represents a lot of security for us. They have a stellar reputation for properly handling FOSS, free and open source software, and for understanding that just saying it's BSD is not the same as auditing the code, making sure the dependencies are okay, and that you don't sneak in a GPL or a proprietary in there somewhere. And again, GPL is a lovely license. I'm just giving that as an example because it's incompatible. So let's talk about other security motivations, because those are the internal ones that I gave. Let's talk external. Y'all heard about the Cyber Resiliency Act? This is a very interesting problem. I am very happy that the Eclipse Foundation, that Mozilla, that Apache are all stepping up, that they're expressing their concerns. The US Cybersecurity Executive Order is another example. ISO 27001 is saying that we have to be able to present proper SBOMs. The NCSC, it's a UK security council, they say that if you fail an audit on your software security, you're liable for lots of money. And when I say lots of money, I mean percentage of your net revenue. I don't mean like there was a car company that was recently fined $10,000 in Australia, and no, stuff that would make shareholders very upset. And finally, there's another one, NESAS. This one's telco specific, but once again, the point is that software has finally entered that stage where it's becoming very accountable, and I am thrilled about it. I am thrilled that it's becoming observable what is going into your computer. And the government's getting involved. We want to play well with this. We actually want to be well ahead of the curve. So, speaking of these legal implications, the legal team struggled a bit with the EULA for the VS Code Marketplace. It's clear that if you use VS Code, you're allowed to use the Marketplace. It's complicated. We weren't even sure if VSCodium is allowed. And VSCodium uses OpenVSX. So, let's talk about the publication rights. Once again, VSX, you can publish, and if you don't put a license, one is given to you. Très bien. You also, you're responsible for ensuring, this is what they say in the EULA. You're responsible for ensuring that you have all the necessary rights to make your offering available under the license you have stipulated. This cuts the chain of cuts the chain of responsibility in a very mature way. Meanwhile, on the other side, this is text that I copy-pasted from their EULA, and honestly, I'm not even going to try to read it out loud. But the slides are going to be available if you feel like reading it. This is on the Microsoft site. I threw parser errors when I was trying to read it. So speaking of the single vendor issue, all I will say from an Ericsson perspective is we prefer foundations. So let's get down to the brass tacks. This is a part of the distributed architecture, and this is the workflow that is being presented at Ericsson for being able to automate having a good compliant marketplace. So you start off with your plugin. Your plugin's external, and you pull it in. And then you have your internal copies that go to the same secure repository. And then we do some scans for security, licensing, signing, this standard stuff. And because we're doing it for an internal marketplace, we can actually get some information on who wants what, and we know where we need to put our effort, the lion's share of our effort. That's a very interesting thing. And if we know that, we can also prioritize making sure those plugins stay available longer. So in terms of reliability, that's great. I really need to mention also, in case you all don't know this, one of my favorite little features of Theia is that you can support multiple marketplaces and have proper routing for the marketplaces. And I think as of next week, we are going to have little check marks for verified plugins available from OpenVSX, and a little warning text potentially saying, hey, are you sure you want to install this unsigned plugin? You know, this for me is the equivalent of putting pants on before going outside in terms of security. And I'm really glad it's not yet secure, but it's getting there, and I am thrilled that we're going in that path. And also, Ericsson contribution from our intern, Vlad. Give him a high five if you ever see him. So once again, we can't ship the ID with no guarantees. And so our ID, it's not just Theia. It's not just anything. It's not just the editor. The IDE has the plugins. We need to make these guarantees on it. And that means that we need to have some, if it's guaranteed, there needs to be some employee that's responsible for that. And the last thing we want is 30,000 or more employees managing their own IT. That is inefficient and incredibly dangerous. So for the security scan, we have something internal that's very similar to Dependabot, but it has a few things that lawyers like that Dependabot doesn't offer. It works towards the automation, and we already more or less automated it. And one thing I'm going to say, in the morning, sometimes I log into work and I say, hey, we got these warnings from our internal tool. And Vince Fugnito says, yeah, they were on Dependabot also this morning. I already fixed them. So before I have the time to address the security concerns, they're fixed. Beautiful. We use certified archives to decrease the amount of man-in-the-middle attacks. We also are using the intranet of Ericsson, and we're aiming to cut the developers off of internet for reliability and security purposes on that. And this, by the way, along with the replication, should reduce the burden on the Eclipse Foundation Open VSX repository. We are hoping that that helps out. It also, of course, will reduce the attack surface of the employees because at this point, they're staying internal. So more on this. We're not telling people don't look at Stack Overflow or anything like that. And it is a future goal to cut off the internet from a developing standpoint. And really, it's to protect internal IP. But the example I will give you, and this is important for Ericsson, we have many, many, many developers. If I ask you to eat, well, if you have a raw egg, you're going to be fine. If I ask you to take 40,000 eggs, mix them up, and drink the equivalent of that, of one egg from that, I'm willing to bet you're going to get salmonella. This is the exact situation when you get into a big company. I trust every single developer one-on-one. When there's a group, there is going to be an accident. And the problem is that it's not going to be contained to one computer. Ransomware can spread across an internal network. This becomes a very big risk, and this is something that people need to be very mindful of. So that is one of the main motivations for this kind of, I'm going to go back, very, very engineered design. So we also have the internal vetting of license scans. Once again, if you're just a home gamer and you're not distributing something, you're fine. If you deliver something, all of a sudden you're subject to every law, every copyright on it, especially in Europe. So this is something that we have to be very mindful of, because it makes things very ambiguous if we're allowed to ship things or not. And kudos to the Eclipse Foundation, not for any action they did in particular, but they have the right culture. And they've been doing proper IP vetting for years, if not decades. This makes our job easier, and we really appreciate that the foundation helps us on that front. So to bring this all together, I want to remind you all, OpenVSX is critical in the ID puzzle for Ericsson, no matter which solution is going forward. If you have similar issues or concerns, and you're shipping something, VSX is the only thing that you can use, really. And so VSX has been so important that it actually graduated out of Cloud Dev Tools, as I mentioned yesterday, and now it's part of its own working group, the OpenVSX working group. Little detail, we're still in the Cloud Dev Tools, though. Now, internally, you might have noticed a reduction in Ericsson contributions to Theia. We believe that Theia is in a healthy enough place right now, and we reallocated the developers to work on the marketplace and the internal plugins for now. But I do want to remind you that we are contributing to the OpenVSX registry. If you look on there and you see Code Checker, that's an Ericsson product. And it's one of the best static analyzers for CC++, by the way. And we have contributed before, and we aim on contributing in the future to the Eclipse Open VSX project. You might have seen the name Yining Wang pass around. So we're doing this. I want to know if anyone else is in this similar situation and how we can work together, because this is a big problem, but it's an interesting problem. So thank you very much. Just a reminder for the votes, I would like to open the floor for questions. I couldn't have been that clear. Thomas, I'm going to bring a mic.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
You mentioned there are about 3,000 plugins on OpenVSX right now, and I was wondering if you know how most of them get on there, if it's somebody taking the source code and putting it up, or if it's upstream that's putting it into the OpenVSX registry.
My answer is a shrug. I did not have a chance to look into that, but I will. I suspect that it's a lot of the automated way of registering, because it's so easy. If there are no other questions, we're on the 25-minute mark. We start at 55. I think that we did the half hour. Thank you. Thank you so much.